Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Onegashimasu. So, I'm sorry to say I'm your second string speaker here. So this was a presentation that was booked by my really good friend Sam Woodcock. He's a developer who's working with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team. And he has been investigating, he's the senior tech lead at the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, and he's been investigating all kinds of great frameworks and things that we can use to build tools for people. And he's become very excited about the possibilities of what we can implement in browsers nowadays. And so he scheduled this talk and was unable to attend for other professional reasons. He's in Kathmandu working with our development team, and so it's a tough job, but somebody's got to do that. And so he asked me to do this talk, so I'm afraid I have some familiarity with the material, but the actual full-on expert is Sam. But that being said, I'm actually really excited about this, and my reasoning for that is actually, those of you who know me will not be surprised, because my reasoning for that is actually philosophical. Jennings is laughing. So here's the thing. Now, speaking of the gentleman who's laughing here, we were together at a gathering called the Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation Retreat some months ago in Oregon. And any of you know Jed Sundwall? Radiant Earth. Okay, so one of the guys who's kind of central to a lot of the cloud native geospatial stuff said to the whole group at one point, if software is to be inclusive, if it's to be available to everyone, of course it should be open source, but it should run in a browser. We all thought about that. My addition was, and if it's to be globally inclusive, it should run in a mobile browser. Because if you actually want to put tools in people's hands, there are many, many billions of people who have access to a device that can run Firefox or Chrome or something like that in their hand. So we're starting here from the idea that what are we doing here at FOSS4G, free and open source software for geospatial? Well, if we're doing free and open source software, sure, it's nice in and of itself. It's free, great. You know, I can tinker with it. I can see the code. I can deploy it myself if I don't want to pay somebody for it. I can still make a business out of it because some people will be happy to pay for it. So, you know, it's a great thing. But my interest in it is more on a level of justice, which is to say, if we're going to share, if we're going to build tools to do things, to make changes in the world, what do those represent? Tools are power. And if we want everyone in the world to have power, then those tools should be accessible to everyone. So, broadly speaking, if we build and use tools that work in ways that people can get the hardware for, i.e. they work on mobile devices, and if we build those tools in such a way that they run without having to download and install things, have root access to your device, be able to get something on the Play Store or the Apple Store, it makes a big difference if people can actually run stuff that actually just works in a piece of software that almost everybody has free access to, like Firefox, my favorite one. So it turns out that there's a lot of stuff happening in the browser. Oh, I should have turned this off because I wanted to do I wanted to quiz people, so hopefully you didn't see that slide yet. What have we got in browsers that allows us to run software? I mean, there's an easy one to sort of, what's that? JavaScript, sure, there's JavaScript. So, I mean, there was a time that was black magic, that we had a web browser that was a way to, read marked up text, hypertext markup language. And then somebody thought, well, while we're at it, I mean, maybe the actual computer that's displaying this web page could take on some of the work. And so JavaScript. Okay, what are some other things that have happened that allow us to, move? If we think of in the browser, meaning not just having all the work happening on a server, but having some work happening on my phone or on my laptop, even if it's not necessarily connected to the internet all the time, or if I don't have a great, connection. What are some other things that have happened in the browser that make it possible for us to do more stuff there? WebAssembly. Yeah. You didn't read the slide, did you? Good, man. Okay, so you got it anyway. Okay, so when I was prepping this talk, somebody said Ajax, and I said, you mean Ajax? Because who the heck uses an XML? but yeah, well, fair enough. But I mean, it's not wrong that we start with something like, well, we can display hypertext. Wow, cool, it links. And then, well, wow, we deep black magic of like JavaScript actually running little programs very inefficiently, but still running little programs on the client without having to hit the server. And then, well, okay, little pieces of the web page can actually, communicate all by themselves, tunneling back to the server sneakily without refreshing the whole page. And then WebAssembly. So I actually want to stop a moment and reflect about WebAssembly. It's spooky. It's wild. I mean, think about this. You have some carefully organized sand, as Randall Munro put it, silicon. Right? You have a chip, and you have a von Neumann architecture with a CPU and some memory and various transactions happening. And then on top of that, you have machine code. You have zeros and ones that tell that carefully organized sand how to shove electrons around. Then over top of that, you have assembly language, which is essentially macros for that machine code, right? I mean, you've got a certain little series of zeros and ones that somebody says is a JMP, jump, okay, so go to this instruction, or go to this memory address, okay. And then over that, you've got the C language. And Dennis Ritchie, one of the guys who wrote the C language, he said, all the power of assembly language with the convenience of, well, assembly language. So, it's sort of a gloss of macros over assembly language. And then, Bjarne Stroustrup says, well, let's add, inheritance and classes to this, and then you get C++. And I'm sure all of you agree that that was a really elegant solution. We don't need to go any further than that, right? Okay, that was the wrong joke for this crowd. But yeah, so we have languages, going from von Neumann architecture to machine code to assembly language to C. And then we have C++ transpiling down to C. We have Rust transpiling down to C. We have interpreted languages like Python that are written in those low-level languages. We have operating systems written primarily in C, C++, a bit of Rust. And then we have browsers, which are programs running on those operating systems. And those browsers are written in a mix of those languages. And then somebody says, look at this browser. You know what I'm going to implement in here? Assembly language. That's weird. That is really weird. You've got this incredible stack of stuff all the way so that somebody can write assembly language again. But what does that give you? I mean, that actually gives you something extraordinary because, well, I guess something I glossed over here is that there's lots of different assembly language. There's different chips, so there are different kinds of machine code and assembly language. And so compiling, writing one program and compiling down to all of those, they call them targets, all of those different things. My phone and the laptop and different devices have different instruction sets. So the fact that somebody provides an assembly language in a browser and that you can write programs into that assembly language that are giving you there's only pennies on the dollar left in terms of performance with the native hardware. You're running WebAssembly in this browser, and it's tunneling right down through almost to the metal. You are getting really high double-digit percentages of the native power of the machine. You can access the CPU, you can access the native storage, you can access the GPU. It's insane, but it's quite an opportunity. Now, of course, you could just write a program that you can ask people to install. Hey, here's Here's the tool that I've got for you. And I talked about inclusivity a little while ago. If I write a tool that I ask you to download from the Play Store or download from my website and install on your device, that's going to work. Certainly I'm going to be able to take advantage of all the power of your machine. Anybody spot the flaw here? Hey, I've written this program that accesses all of the native power of your computer to do great stuff that you're going to love. Can you think of any flaw in that plan? Security, sure. I mean, that also means that if I'm malicious, now I've got an excellent opportunity to have control of your whole life, and certainly your device. But even if I'm not malicious, even if I'm just not that good a programmer, which I'm not, I'm asking you to install something that has tremendous privileges on your device, and somebody else could use that as an attack vector to get into your machine. Which is not to say that there isn't an attack vector in WebAssembly. Of course there is. But at least now those malicious people are up against the Firefox and the Chrome team, not up against me, right? That makes a big difference. I would hope that you would be able to trust me a little more to run my software if I tell you, I'm going to write a program that's going to run on your computer using a tremendous percentage of the native power of your device. But you know who's going to mediate my access to those? The Firefox team, who actually have really good experience at this, and they're they're allowing me to have kind of assembly level access to the native storage, to the CPU, to the GPU, to all these resources, but they're doing so in a way that makes it really hard for me or some other third party to attack your computer that way. So here's my idea. And this is why Sam was so excited about this. We've hit a point where we're able to write software that compiles down to an assembly language that is tremendously powerful. And we're no longer even really talking about client side, right? We always talk about JavaScript being a client side language. You've got powerful things running on the server, and then you can do some stuff on the client side. Well, it's kind of even a different ballgame when what we mean by client side is actually writing a program that uses this much of the native platform's power. So we are at FOSS4G here, so we want to talk a little bit about geospatial. So what does all this mean? First of all, any questions or suggestions or reflections on what I've just talked about, this idea of powerful software being able to run in the browser as an instrument of inclusivity and justice? That sort of resonate with anybody, or anything you want to say about that? Oh God, okay. First of all, let me apologize. I should have, Dragon warned me about that one. All right, so let's see. There is you've got a phone that has like an internet browser on it, right? Okay, good. All right, so the kind of traditional way that we would deliver you a piece of software is we would say, here's an installer, install this thing on your device. Trust us, it's going to be fine. Go to the Play Store and download this. Go to the Android or the App Store on Apple. Go to a website and download this thing, and click through the installer saying, I agree. Here's 47 pages of small print, and it'll install on your machine. And I promise it'll do something nice. That's one way of delivering software to people. Now, because of some weird, inspired, possibly mentally ill people working on this thing called WebAssembly, we have a way to deliver you software where you literally just open a tab on your browser, go to an HTTP address, and the thing that opens, for all intents and purposes, appears to be a web page. But that web page, actually, using a framework called WebAssembly, an assembly language is a very, very ancient and low-level kind of computer code. It's just one tiny step away from literal ones and zeros. That assembly language, the browser itself, your Firefox or your Chrome or your Edge browser or your Safari browser, is actually got kind of a tunnel right down to the very bottom level of your machine to actually access the processor of the machine. So A weird thing that might happen nowadays that you wouldn't have seen a few years ago is opening a web page and hearing the fan of your computer spool up. Because that web page is actually running programs. 5 or 10 years ago, any program that was running on your browser in a web page would have been something called JavaScript, which is, a lot of people would consider essentially a toy computer language. People hate it. It's great that it exists, but it's probably something like 1/100th the speed of something that's running natively on your computer. Whereas something running in WebAssembly might be running at 95% of the speed of something running natively on your computer. So in other words, we have a new avenue to deliver actual software, not just a page or a few little calculations, but actual genuinely powerful, using a lot of your computer or your phone's resources, software, without you having to install something, and most critically, without you having to take risks. Because the people mediating that access are smart, dedicated, motivated, and their whole existence is at stake by not, providing an attack surface. The people at Firefox or Edge or Chrome or Safari will lose their job if it becomes too easy to attack you through them. So it's cool, is the basic answer. And those of us who want to deliver software to people in a way that they can trust and then they can be safe with, but that's powerful, so they really have like good tools, not just like sort of toy crap, it's exciting for us. Right, other thoughts or reflections? Okay, first of all, does that help? Okay, and anyone else for whom that helped, just keep quiet so she's the only one who feels like she had to speak up. We don't want anyone to feel like they're in good company. Sorry? Well, okay, so that's the thing is WebAssembly, it's obviously in the web, so you have to be online to get it. But the moment something is running in a browser, it doesn't have to communicate with the server anymore. So to a first approximation, particularly in a mobile browser, and even more so if you use what's called a progressive web app. Anybody know what that is? Okay, a progressive web app is basically a thing whereby you can take a web page and deliver it on like the Play Store. You literally just wrap it up in a thing that looks like a mobile app. From the perspective of the user, it looks like an app. From the perspective of the person delivering it, it's just really easy because you just wrap your web app in something that looks like an app. But it does give us, as the developer, a little bit more control over what's called caching. And caching is when your device, it opens a web page and there's some memory and storage reserved for that web page so that next time you go to it, it doesn't have to load again. So yeah, to a first approximation, if you have a well-designed WebAssembly application, you load it once, it caches all of its, they tend to load slowly. That's definitely one disadvantage of WebAssembly is, you open a normal web page and people expect, sub-second loading times. And with a WebAssembly app, quite often the first load is going to be a couple of seconds. Could be a noticeable number of seconds, like, hey, what's going on here? But if all goes well, from there on, not only is it super high performance while it's still running, and it doesn't need to talk to the server anymore, but after you close it and open it up again, it's all still cached, so it comes back. So, yeah, my mental picture of delivering, apps in the browser is that if you manage your caching carefully and you write your application properly, it doesn't need to be online. And in fact, our explicit intention, I'll talk about this later, our explicit intention is for it to be primarily working offline. That there are moments of sync, and I'll come to that, the sort of syncing model. Does that answer your question well? All right, cool. Okay, let me come back to this. So, I had suspected you, Jason, of reading the notes, but you got the answer all by yourself, so. Well done. Yes, WebAssembly. Okay, so there's, WebAssembly. It was introduced in 2017, so it's fairly recent. At the time, it was revolutionary, even weird. A lot of people, including myself, thought this is nuts, but it wasn't. It turns out it was a brilliant innovation, and the more I sort of look at it, the more I realize that it's a big deal for, indeed, inclusivity. It's mainly the C language, the ancient language, which was, I believe, it was the 50s, right? At least 60s? Yeah, so I mean, it goes back a long time. But Rust and Go, which are modern, high power systems language, they can work in WebAssembly. There are even some ways to turn Python into WebAssembly. Python is very slow compared to these languages, but nevertheless, it's a nice language to write in, and you can get better performance out of WebAssembly than you would out of trying to fit that into JavaScript or something. Well, and the next thing that you can do is, well, guess what else is written in these languages, these low-level languages? Databases. So the title of this talk is Postgres in the Browser. And that's actually a result of a very specific thing that happened, which is somebody has ported the Postgres. So there's a joke on the Postgres is a particular database. So if you look it up, it's PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL. And there's a big debate on how to pronounce it. And the people who made this open source database, by the way, it's open source, it's wonderful. The people who made it say that they can resolve the question of how you pronounce it by saying it's pronounced, Postgresql. It's pronounced database, which is clever. It is great. It's very much one of my favorite tools. So there's this tool called Emscripten, which is the thing that translates other languages into this WebAssembly thing. And so somebody has gone to the trouble of putting Postgres into the browser. So who here has actually worked with SQLite in browsers and mobile before? Lots of you. Okay. Would you work with SQLite if you could work with Postgres natively? Yeah, lots of people going, no, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, so SQLite, don't get me wrong, SQLite has been amazing. It's been so helpful to be able to have a database-like thing. But compared to an actual database, it's still a go-kart compared to a Ferrari. I mean, it really is a different thing. Okay, so it's the team at Electric, this PG Lite project that I'll come back to in a little bit, that is actually done, and this isn't, I don't have a demonstration of it here. I wish Sam was here to actually give you some live demos of it. But this is no longer speculative. This has happened. It works. And the next facilitator here is these conflict-free replicated data tapes, CRDT. That sounds like a scary and weird acronym, but what it actually is, basically, it's the same thing as like the Git model. Who here has heard of or used GitHub? Like almost everybody. Okay. So Git, the software underlying GitHub, is, I hope this isn't too basic for people. I'm not sure to pitch this here, but I mean, what is Git? Basically, it's a conflict-free replicated data type. So I have a GitHub page. It's the single source of truth. It's the main repository of a piece of software that I'm working on. Git's mainly for software. Okay, so there's this main thing, the SSOT, the single source of truth. And there are a bunch of remotes. So a Git remote. So I mean, I have a GitHub on my phone. I've got Git repos on every single one of my computers. So anything that I happen to be working on, there's a copy on HotOSM's GitHub, and there's a copy on, I hate to say it, both of my phones. In a failed attempt to separate my personal and professional lives, I have two phones, and now I just have both all the time. So oops, kids, don't try this at home. It doesn't work. But I also have several laptops, and I have 5 or 10 collaborators for any one of these given projects who also have copies of this same set of code. So, I mean, literally today, I wrote a couple of lines of code on my laptop while I was offline. I got back online again. I connected to the single source of truth to the GitHub repo, and I pushed my stuff back up, and I was able to check if there was a merge conflict, right? So this conflict-free idea doesn't mean that there's never the case that arises that two people work on the same line of code, but there's mechanisms for dealing with it. And these have been developed by enormous projects creating enormous amounts of sophisticated software and value. Works great. So this scary idea of a conflict-free replicated data type, if you know what GitHub is, then you know what that is. And it's not that scary at all, actually. So, which brings me back to your question of online or offline. Then we have a model, right? We have a mental model that we have something that we're working on, say a piece of geography. After all, this is FOSS4G for geospatial. So say we've got a mapping app. Everybody's looking to, 5 minutes? Oh God. Oh, I thought you said 15 minutes like 2 minutes ago. Okay. Good Lord. Okay. Do we have questions? Good Lord. Okay. Well, I did say I was going to say something about Postgres in the browser, so I'll just give you this bit. Not yet done. PostGIS. Who knows what PostGIS is? How many of you would like to be able to run PostGIS on people's own phones? Who knows what that would imply? Like magic. It's almost done. You can go to Electric SQL's webpage and you can see the progress of the PostGIS extension being enabled on the PG Lite, which is enabled in the browser, which also works on mobile. Imagine what that's going to do when you're actually able to implement like routing algorithms, when you're actually able to implement like serious geographical tools, the whole suite that's in PostGIS, which is this fabulous, unbelievable tool on the client side, on people's phones. These are real tools. This is real power. So yeah, take a look. Exciting times coming. Watch this space. Come and see me if you want to learn more. All right.